Hey guys, Crusty Old Crow here, doing something a little different, a little out of my normal purview. I'm going to read you guys a comic book. Why? Because it's a G.I. Joe comic book. Which comic book is it? G.I. Joe #1 by Skybound Entertainment Group, part of that Dark Energon Universe, and also the kickoff that comes out of things like Destro, Scarlet, Cobra Commander, and Duke miniseries that we've all been clamoring about. This, of course, is a co-adventure between Image Comics, Skybound Entertainment, and Hasbro. So as I roll us in, you'll see a lot of different imagery that captures all of the stuff in this comic book, and I'm going to read it to you and give you my thoughts and opinions as we go through that. Why? Because I am been playing around with the channel a little bit lately. You may have noticed I've done something called a waste of your time, basically. A very special waste of your time, but a waste of your time nonetheless. And it really was, because it was worth something from my time. I have been working with some software that gives me voiceover abilities and certain other cut benefits now that I'm paying for it as a premium member. And those series were about feeling out that kind of tech and seeing if I wanted to do it. All this is gearing up to me eventually reading the IDW Max Brooks co-venture of Cobra Wars anthology, all the authors that write all these short stories, kicking it off. I want to get that done right, so I wanted to decide whether or not I needed to get some voice software or if I was comfortable enough reading it my own way. So in order to get ready for that, something I want to do for the people who drive while they listen to me, or for the visually impaired, I decided I would get some practice in on that. Grab one of my many G.I. Joe custom variant covers and open one up and read it out to you guys. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you guys will enjoy this. Hit like, share, subscribe if you do. Hit like, share, subscribe if you don't. Don't matter to me, but I'd appreciate, guys. We're just trying to grow this channel as much as we can right now, and I'm trying to bring you some fresh new content as far as I go. Now, I acknowledge reading a comic to you is not an original idea. We have great guys at that. I do invite you to go check out Comics Explained, a fantastic narration of comics that are on the market today. Billy in Action is another one I truly enjoyed. It kind of got me thinking I could do this. I could enjoy doing this. So credit where credit is due. Reading comics is not my foray for this channel. It was normally classified review and line reviews of toys. But we got to grow. All right, guys, here we go with G.I. Joe #1. Bear with us. Still available within comic stores with over 18 different cover variations. G.I. Joe #1 is a production of Skybound Entertainment Group, Image Comics, and Hasbro licensing, as I said earlier. The result of which is a series that identifies very closely with the G.I. Joe classified toy line. And when we look at this, you will see a lot of the imagery that is shared with some of the things you've already recognized with that toy line, and perhaps you'll have fun seeing hints. But it's all part of the Energon universe. This is, of course, mission log to 01.001.1, and we have our lead team of Josh Williamson as the writer, Jordi Ballar as the colorist, Tom Riley as the artist, and Russ Wooten as the letterer. And of course, all the other cover support, which you see here, all the people responsible for making those fantastic variation covers. Again, Energon Universe incorporates Transformers and Void Rivals, as I said, and there's your little nod to Hasbro, which is really what always brings the crow back, right? Because I do a lot of Hasbro classified review stuff. I just feel like doing this comic made sense. And then there's your creative teams at Skybound and at Image, respectively. You'll see a lot of big names there. We pick up where we left off with other miniseries such as Destro, Scarlet, Cobra Commander, and of course Duke, where this first montage of imagery comes from. While we recapture those key moments from his story, Duke himself is giving a speech. I'm not going to lie to you. We're up against something that is going to feel like an impossible fight. The enemy is unpredictable, dangerous. They not only want us dead, they put the freedom of the world at risk. But I promise you, we can win. I've seen it. I've done it. Each and every one of you has the skills to take them down. The only way we lose is if we give up. But you're the best of the best. So, listen up, soldiers. Here is your objective. And we pull out from that memory sequence to see a C-130 flying through the air. its back bay door open. And jetting out of it with rocket trails behind them is this new Joe squad, led by Duke. He's been giving the brief on the move, falling out of a plane. So clearly over a microphone, I guess. But in that team, we see he's accompanied by Stalker, Rock and Roll, Clutch, Covergirl, and oddly enough, that appears to be the Baroness. And if you want to know why she's there, again, you got to get caught up on the previous miniseries of Duke, Cobra Commander, Scarlet, and Destro. These things will paint the picture. But now, this team is deploying out of the back of a C-130 using the traditional Joe jetpacks. And we're opened into the action. Now we see what the Joes are up against as they project out of the back of that plane, and they're engaging a swarm of drones, assaulting them from all areas. And each member of the team has to engage these drones. It's not sure what these drones' intent are, their level of lethality. They're not shooting at them, but they seem desperate to engage them somehow, and the Joes need to defend themselves. While this is happening, Duke is having another conversation with somebody, and he's telling them about this team that he's got assembled to them. They're talking about the members of the team. Take out the enemy, Duke yells to his team as they are plummeting through the sky on their jetpacks. Meanwhile, the conversation that's happening, of course, with what you would expect from a G.I. Joe #1 issue, where they are setting up this new team for us to get to know. That conversation, of course, occurring between Colonel Hawk and Duke. It's a conversation that occurs clearly at a different place at a different time. But it begins with, give me your candid thoughts on your team, Conrad. Of course, Colonel Hawk. Rock and Roll. Craig S. McConnell specializes in heavy artillery, top of his class. But that's just his file. You spend any time with him, and you can see that he's got a big heart and loyal to the day he dies. Stalker. As deadly as Lorenzo Wilkinson can be in any given situation, he also knows how to diffuse them. It explains how he knows so many different languages. He's got a way with talking with people in the same way he knows how to handle a weapon. Covergirl. Courtney Krieger used to be a model, but holy hell, she is so much more than that. She builds tanks that can take a beating, and she ain't afraid to test them herself. Clutch. Lance Steinberg is the best driver I know, in the streets or in the field. He has his flaws, maybe a little old school, I realize that. But if I needed to ride into battle, he's my first pick. Then we have the Baroness. And so all the while as we've been going, we've been seeing Rock and Roll and Stalker and Covergirl and Clutch all on their rocket packs, individually dealing with these drones and defending or evading and all these things. All the while this conversation has happened. But now we actually get confirmation that it is, in fact, the Baroness with them. So again, go back. Find out why she's there. Of course, if you followed the recent invasion of Springfield in the more recent comics of G.I. Joe, there's some explanation to be found there as to how she ended up all this way. But of course, the Duke series, I think, is the key reason behind it. So here we see her defending herself against the drones, and she's not having a great time with this. So now we're seeing the Baroness, and she's blasting one drone, and she's realizing, our guns are useless, she's yelling, and I must improvise. And she dives from one to the other, and she's stabbing one with the knife, like she's bouncing around through midair like an acrobat, showing off her skills, right? And this is where you can see Hawk and Duke have to talk a little bit about this Baroness character. And over a quick flashback, we hear Duke saying, I know you're not a fan of my choice to add Anastasia Sirsanova to the team, sir. Considering she's a war criminal you met while you were both locked up, no, not ideal. But I can't deny her talents, Hawk replies. Simultaneously, we watch as the Baroness has defeated her drones, and we see her lack of humility starting to kick in as she says to the rest of the team, time to catch up, Joes. It appears only I have the skills to take down our... And all of a sudden, luck finds her, right? Oh, are you kidding me? She's like, as her rocket pack just goes out on her as soon as she starts talking about her advantage. Now what we get here is the question about what is the status of the Baroness and her skills amongst the Joe, because while it seemed like she may be the most dangerous and most talented, and even Hawk had to concede that she had such talents. Now she appears to be the biggest liability as she's dropping from the sky. So what you get is some sort of Tom Cruise Mission Impossible-esque moment with Duke having to come to the rescue to the Baroness before she crashes to the ground. And it's more than just gravity that starts eating up those precious seconds while the Baroness is swearing, trying to get her suit to come back on. Going, come on, you stupid contraption. She needs that jump pack to kick back in. Duke's like, damn it. As he looks down, he realizes he's got to retrieve her, get that thrust back up. And not only that, there's drones closing in, so he has to quickly dispatch them. And he fires a shot, and he has to rocket through their debris to even catch up to Baroness. And what she say? She's like, what are you doing, you fool? And he's like, I'm trying to fix your jetpack. You're going to get us both killed, she screams. And you can see the ground coming. But this is G.I. Joe #1, and the Baroness is a character that you know they're not going to kill off in the first issue. So of course, Duke has somehow tinkered and made that jetpack work again, even though it pretty much ignited in the air earlier. It's enough to give them that quick thrust downward and spare them the impact. Gives them a graceful enough landing that everyone can walk away. But instead of any sign of gratitude or relief that her life had just been saved, Baroness snatches a moment away from Duke to appreciate what he's done. He's like, just in time. And she's like, hardly, American. I wouldn't need your help if this equipment wasn't so shoddy. She just disconnects the jump pack and just tosses it aside. She's not done being pissed off yet. And she says, even in a training situation, we almost died. Surely any real battle will be our graveyard. And she storms off, leaving Duke and the rest of the team to kind of absorb what just happened. Duke's left stunned. And of course, Rock and Roll's trying to console him a little bit. Like he says, don't worry about it, Duke. These are the early days, brothers. It's going to be okay. Right? And then we're done with this training scenario. Apparently that's what it was, right? And we're back now into Hawk's office. And it's now, this is where that actual conversation between Duke and Hawk has been occurring. And it's Hawk standing in front of Duke, comfortably over a cup of coffee. But Duke is, of course, almost at the position of attention as this discussion's going on. He says, but the Baroness is right, sir. We're outmatched, outgunned, and behind in tech. We're not ready. If we went up against the enemy today, we're screwed. And just like any good cinematic plot-moving device, we're screwed resonates. It shows that Duke's not confident in this new Joe unit that he's put together with Hawk for whatever this new task is going to be. He doesn't think they're ready. He says, we're screwed, and we are taken from that office now, of course, to Springfield, USA. And we share a common glance at a normal everyday cul-de-sac on a beautiful summer day. And then it pans down and we see Destro watching a batch of soldiers marching down the street. He says, our army grows with each passing day. Because of the Energon you have discovered, we are entering a new world of warfare. Our people are using it to upgrade the firepower and destructive capability of all our armies. The Energon fuels our assets unlike anything else our armies could have hoped to achieve. The world has seen what we can do and it trembles with fear, but it's not enough. Now what we're seeing here is almost a exact same duplicate of what we saw with the Joe team. We're having a memory and a conversation simultaneously happening, this time from a Cobra angle, between Destro and someone else having their discussion. And so Destro is talking about how the Energon has changed everything, pardon me. And this is, of course, harken back to the Cobra Commander series, the Destro series, and all the other prequel Energon U series that we've been talking about. And you see, the scientist pointing over at the Dark Energon results, and then you see over Scrap Iron loading his drone, and then over from the Destro series, the Bats. And we know that the Tomac, Zaymont, and Destro have now united their respective armies. So when he's talking about how it's changed our armies, plural, he's talking about his own Iron Grenadiers. He's talking about the Crimson Guard. He's talking about Cobra in general. They all have this advantage now. And while we are watching him describing the advantage, and we see the massive armies and the Hiss tanks and the weaponry and the bats, he's even describing how they have this insurmountable advantage over their foes. But he's saying, but it's not enough. And he's saying it to Cobra Commander. And now we see Destro's talking to Cobra Commander, and Cobra Commander standing in the shadows, working a screwdriver on his new mechanical clawed hand. In the background somewhere, we see these vials of Dark Energon and like this snake in fluid, right? And he's putting on his jacket afterwards. He says, finally, we agree on something, Destro. His helmet is off in the side. He says, Cobra needs so much more than what we currently have at hand. Everything to date has been child's play compared to what we will need to do to take over the world. And the way we see Cobra Commander here, this, the mangled face, silhouetted, dark, and you can't see the details, but you can see the scarring. The clawed hand that he's working on, his helmet, sinister as it is, off to the side, glinting what little lights in the room. And, he puts a glove on his hand afterwards and jackets up and reaches for it. This is all very reminiscent of a Darth Vader-like character. It's like how the mangled Anakin putting his helmet back on as he's talking to Tarkin in his dome there, right? Except now the lights are out this time. And you get a different vibe from this Cobra Commander. It's almost like you can't picture that voice that he once had being the same with this one. This Cobra Commander feels so much darker. Of course, speaking of dark, we get Destro reminding him why he's there and why he's come to him of all the other, weapons manufacturers and arms dealers out there. Why Destro is such an advantage to have. Destro stands near the doorway in the dark room and says to the Cobra Commander, I believe I've engineered something that will surprise you. Mercer? Mercer walks in and, got it, boss. And he's got this standard assault rifle, and he hands it over to the Cobra Commander. And we still don't really see Cobra Commander with his helmet on or off at this point. He's just from the shoulders down, but he seems almost insulted. He says, a rifle? We already have plenty of guns, Destro. All you do is make guns. I'm beginning to question how much you truly bring to this partnership. And now we're made privy to the battle between two confident alpha dogs. Not a physical battle, but a battle of wills, mindset, and alliances. Who's going to submit to who? Because while Destro anticipated the Cobra Commander wouldn't really give a rat's ass about a new assault rifle, he's playing a game with them. And the Cobra Commander doesn't want to play games. In fact, he's kind of ready to show Destro what it is to play a game. So while the Destro, turns on a spotlight, and there you have a dummy human with a Kevlar vest on, and he says, let's see how good your aim is, Commander. Cobra Commander ain't having it. He turns the rifle to Destro and points it at his face, and he says, indeed. Destro's got no choice. He's got to move the play along. He didn't get what he wanted out of Commander. I'm not entertained. So the Cobra Commander just placates him. He says, and he turns the weapon to the target. So in these few lines of dialogue and these few beautifully rendered little dark to light images, what we get here is a nice moment between Destro and Cobra Commander, right where we left them as they were forming their alliance in the end of the Destro miniseries. And what we see is that the Cobra Commander and Destro hadn't really settled their egos of how they could really benefit each other. One felt like he was pulling the other through things, as it would seem. But as we watch Cobra Commander take this assault rifle, one hand it nonchalantly towards the target. Not two hands, one hands it. That's how serious he takes it. He squeezes that trigger, and the results change everything for him. And for them both. And Destro has known this for a while. He sat back and he's enjoying watching Cobra Commander shred this target with bluish, laser-like energy. Just zap, 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 zap. He says to him, Energon at the pull of a trigger. Imagine every member of our forces armed with one. Mercer stands back. He says, I always wanted my own laser gun. Cobra Commander's probably not even hearing them over the reports of that gun. Zap, zap, zap. He's just, yes, right? He's suddenly realized he's got more than even he knew he had. And it came from Destro, and it came from the Energon. And now I think this is where we see that shift in that dichotomy between them, how Destro perceives Cobra Commander and how Cobra Commander sees the asset that is Destro and where this Dark Energon can take their war against who? This brings to an end the conversation that we get to see between Cobra Commander Mercer and Destro as Cobra Commander continues to enjoy shredding that target. And it pans back now to a different scene as we see from behind someone, them entering some nice establishment in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, right? And he's walking up to this club or place. It's a beautified hotel from the looks of it, but it looks like it's a very well-lit, popular night place, right? And he meets up with this bouncer, and the bouncer is pointing at the sign that says no guns. And whoever this person is reports back, yeah, I know. We enter, and it's this nice, beautifully lit like nightclub, like something really posh, high rollers kind of stuff, very probably expensive. Again, this is Abu Dhabi, so you got to figure everybody in this club is a millionaire or trending in some hard way. We get the wink that is meant for this person as we walk into this club, and off in the background you can see, better lit than most other areas, a table that appears to be the destination. We get there with this person, and we're greeted with nothing but hostility. So now, through the eyes of this person, we get to see the ringleader and his henchmen who are sitting at this table react, and they say, nah, I already told you I ain't talking to you. I don't care who you work for, buddy. Get this guy out of here, okay? And so the henchmen are reacting to that. One of them points a gun right in our faces and says, never should have come here, pretty boy. Especially unarmed. You just looking for trouble. What we get now is a change in the camera angle. Now it's no longer about us. It's about this new mystery person, a guy in this nice suit. He looks like he's a local of Abu Dhabi. Nice clean haircut. Definitely he's got that special agent kind of appeal. And all he's saying is something like that. Well, he cracks this guy right across the jaw, takes the gun clean out of the hand, like with one single punch. All of a sudden, there's a panic in set at that table. The boss is like, kill him! This is where our hero or our special agent is now squared off, and there's a bit of some identity revealed. He's like, well, I prefer my fights in a cage, but I could use a workout. And he squares off, and you can see the way he's got his fist handling. He's got a fighting style that he's about to express to all these goons as they've been, cracking their knuckles and pulling their ties down, getting ready to do the boss's bidding. They figure they're going to lay the beat down on this guy. So the first one winds up and just comes in with a hard right and easily sidestepped by this mystery agent who, returns the favor by breaking his elbow with a craned wrist, right? He turned his back to the second guy who tries to grab him from behind, but that only gets that guy eating an elbow, followed by about 7 or 8 succession punches to the face that turns his face into a deflated soccer ball. One more goon tries to, charge at him, but he doesn't expect our mystery hero to kind of close the distance a lot faster than he expected with this flying Muay Thai knee. And what we see is that last goon dropping backwards, hands in the air, blood and chiclet spitting everywhere in front of his boss. And we're seeing it in slow motion as we see the body smash through the table, flattened out on the ground, and he's just standing there, this new character. Relax now, just casually leans in. He says, you ready to listen? The boss is like, yeah. Good. Don't sell to Mars Industries, is all this guy says, right? That he came there, he kicked everyone's teeth in, worked his way through a high-priced, very dangerous security detail. And he could have said that right off the start, but he had to prove a point, and the point gets proven, right? And you can tell the boss is like, whatever that message meant to him, it had the effect he was looking for. And all of a sudden, there's a beep, 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 and it's coming from his watch. He looks at it, and he says, excuse me. Looks at it, and we read, Risk, which is this guy's name. Risk is what we now know the character to be. And it says, change in plans, return home. Okay. And that's where we pan out of that scenario. So while Risk, this new character, is being called back to his employers, which could be either G.I. Joe or Cobra, it's not quite defined yet, we are now taken back to Sunset in Utah desert and watching, it seems, the construction of the pit. Also watching that, sitting on the front of his Jeep, is Duke, who, Conrad appears to be taking a moment to himself to appreciate the quiet. So while Conrad's sitting there staring off into the sunset, Hawk approaches from downhill and comes up towards him. Says, "You out here feeling sorry for yourself, soldier?" "Not at all, Colonel. Just thinking about how I'm going to turn this group into a team. They all have time in the field, rock and roll, and Stalker especially. But they haven't seen what I've seen. And getting to work on their flaws." And then Hawk interrupts him, says, "Leading isn't constantly pointing out your team's problems. You support them. You embrace what makes them great, and you showcase it. Sure, you create some boundaries. You help them turn their weaknesses into strengths." Duke shakes his head and looks down. He says, "I just need them to do what I would do. It could save their lives." Hawk pauses for a moment and says, "Let me tell you the story of my first command, Conrad." And this sets us up for yet another moment between Conrad Hauser and Colonel Hawk. Not with a desk between them, but with an issue that needs mentorship and almost a fatherly approach, it seems. And so the dialogue becomes very important as we see a lack of confidence and a need for confidence being met here between Hawk and Duke. So then Hawk recounts that first command and he makes his point very clear. He says, "I thought I knew my crew. We had been on countless training simulations together. We were a well-oiled American fighting machine. I trained them to be just like me. But that all went out the window once we hit the field of battle, and who they really were took over. It was how we survived. It was what made them great. And from that point on, our bond was forged in fire. My point is, we already got you. We don't need more. We need them to be the best versions of themselves. And that is what is going to make G.I. Joe different than any other command you've ever had and any team in the world." Now Duke gets it. He says, "I read you, sir. I'll get it together." Good. Now go back to your barracks and get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very busy day." "Sir?" Duke has no idea what he's meaning. Apparently at that, Hawk's got this little smirk on his face as he's walking away. Duke can't see it. He says, "Shoot, I guess I should have let off with that. You're going on your first mission." So like any good beginning, we've now had that motivation to the unsteady leader that gives them that renewed confidence. And so, of course, now it's time for that first mission, right? So we now move, assumingly, to a briefing room in the pit the next morning, right? And the team is gathering around this oval table. Baroness, you can't help but notice, is sitting off by herself. No one's sitting beside her, while across from her, Clutch is relaxed. He's going over something in a sketchbook, rock and roll, sitting over his shoulder. And right beside them is CoverGirl, sitting nice, prim and proper, with across from her, Stalker. And we're in that perfect pre-briefing moment where old friends unite around the table along with the other professionals that have to sit and watch them all get along, right? And these old friends are Rock and Roll and Clutch. And of course, Rock and Roll's kind of giving Clutch the gears throughout this, but Clutch brings it on himself. So we watch it, it kicks off with Rock and Roll leaning in and saying, "What you got there, Clutch?" And Clutch responds back, "Multi-purpose attack vehicle. I call it the Vamp. I built something like it before, but I'm updating it for G.I. Joe." Rock and Roll right away, "Needs more firepower." "I agree. Hey, CoverGirl, why the dye job? I liked you with auburn hair." Now, CoverGirl, of course, almost like cold shoulder, this annoyed look, of course, and she is blonde, right? Take note of that. And she says, "That's why I changed it," right? Just immediate shutdown on Clutch as he was trying to, kind of break the ice with her. She kept that ice thick, right? And so Rock and Roll slaps him on the back. "Ah, she gotcha. And this is now the moment where Duke walks in. So shuts everything down before too much more can go on with that kind of dialogue. He walks in, he says, "Pay attention, Joes. You are all aware of why codename G.I. Joe was formed. To find and combat deadly emerging weapons technology, especially massive robots that disguise themselves as vehicles." And he's turned on the teleprompter, and what's the very first thing we see on the screen? But it's freaking Optimus Prime right there. And he says, "Recently, we became aware of a new incident." Reminding us that the G.I. Joe through Skybound property has a number of other parallel story arcs going on through Transformers and Void Rivals. These G.I. Joe sub-stories have already established that many people know about the aliens that Duke is talking about here. Of course, the Transformers, the Cybertronians, right? Duke himself encountered a Transformer at the very start of his series. So most of the team seems aware of what they're up against when he says robotic enemies, but Duke has to carry on with this back brief because now they are actually employed on a very specific mission to it. So what we get here is a double-page spread that shares the common image of a large piece of Cybertron technology sitting in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by pollution belt restraints, like all the hazmat teams are there, several little boats flying around, trying to buzz back and forth, and two warships just kind of circling it. And it reminds me a lot of what we would expect at the end of Marvel's The Eternals, with Tiamat's hands sticking out of the Indian Ocean, which apparently is what the new Captain America movie might talk about a little bit. Just a little side note there. But this image kind of speaks through it all. So because they want to narrate a Joe side of things and a Cobra side of things, this page is shared by both Joe and Cobra conversations, briefings between a leader and their troops. So I'll read it to you the way that I understand it to go for flow. And it starts with Duke's side of the conversation saying, "There were sightings of our robotic enemies in the Pacific, some kind of massive crash. A large section of their technology was recovered, and a shard of it is being transported to a secure lab in Colorado to be studied. However, there's been a series of break-ins at weapons and advanced technologies facilities, including Mars Industries. We're concerned that someone's making a play at the same kind of advanced weapons we're out to stop. The Joe's mission is to protect the technology as it's studied before being taken to a more secure facility. It must not fall into the wrong hands." As Duke is giving this briefing to the guys in the room and CoverGirl, Destro's giving a similar briefing using the exact same satellite imagery of the shard, right? Or of the Cybertronian mess in the Pacific. And he says, "Because of our new technology, we can track traces of Energon, which has led us to a lab in Colorado. Support Mercer and his Vipers. Allow them to acquire the technology and get out as quickly as you can." Cobra Commander then looks over at Destro and he says, "Hold that thought, Destro. This is a moment to see the full forces of these wondrous weapons you have developed. Kill everyone but leave one. Leave a witness to spread the word of our glory. Let them fear the name of Cobra." Right? Holy crap. Okay, so this is really important, all right? What we've just seen is these two briefings leading to a clash between these two forces. The contact's inevitable. They're both going to Colorado. Cobra knows how to get to the Energon, and Joe is trying to protect this shard that has the Energon there, right? Destro had the plan. He's got Mercer and his Vipers going in, and he's like, all you other assets, you're going to support this. Mission success is almost guaranteed as all parties on Cobra sides understand it with what they have, but it's not enough for Cobra Commander. And this gives us a weird vibe when we read this about Cobra Commander, because it's not enough to just take the shard. He's trying to send a message now. And he says he wants to see the results of these weapons that Destro has given him. He's pretty sure he knows what they're capable of. And he says, kill everyone, but leave one witness. Right? He's going in for a bloodbath. Now, my previous takes on Cobra Commander has not always been this bloodthirsty, but this guy can only be described as bloodthirsty at this point. So what we get now is we're back at the Colorado facility, I think, and it says it starts off outside the building, panning inward, and what we get is we get the Baroness saying, "And this is how we save the world. babysitting. And we now close in and we see that the Baroness and the rest of the Joe team are now guarding that shard at that facility, and they're in this big tech monitoring room. There's a staff around, and you know, Stalker and Rock and Roll are maintaining a sentry position at the window, watching outward, and behind them is this shard, right? And she says, "This is a waste of my time and talents." To which Stalker returns. He says, "You can go anytime you want, Baroness. I'd rather not be on the same team as a war criminal anyway." Right? Baroness. She turns to him. She's pissed off, and in her native tongue, some sort of Slavic language, she lays into him and just cusses him out. But Stalker ain't having it. He speaks too many languages, including that one. So he turns around and says, "Oh yeah," and he feeds her a jacking like she has never apparently received. It's so much that it brings out the manga in her eyes that she goes, "Well, how dare you?" And it's like, "Enough." Duke walks in. He says, "We're not each other's enemies. This mission may not be glamorous, but it's our orders, and I need both of you." And he's about to correct the whole situation when all the power suddenly goes out. Static on every monitor. All the systems are crashing, and Clutch right away holds his hands up. He's like, "It wasn't me." Right? And one of the texts is like, "Something's hacking our systems," and all of a sudden the whole room turns red. And that's the one thing you'll see in this comic is they pay really good attention to the art, not just in how it's drawn, but all of a sudden lighting becomes really important in the imagery. And as we go, you see it. All of a sudden the whole room turns red. Everybody is just in this filter blood red room. Baroness is like, "Nothing I've ever seen before." Stalker's like, "Yeah, me neither." All of a sudden Duke sees the Cobra symbol and it clicks. He's like, "Everybody down." And now we're in a Matrix moment. We are swept outside from the perspective behind a Fang attack helicopter, which is now strafing the floor where the shard is being kept, through the windows, just laying into it with its nose cannon, just, and inside you can see the Baroness, Duke, and Stalker just trying to get out of the path of shattering glass and probably 50 caliber bullets, whatever's raining down on them. It's panging through everything right now, right? And we now go downstairs. You can see the security systems are all shut down, and all these Cobra troops are pushing through the security way. They're like, "Hit it, get upstairs fast," right? We get back upstairs. Lighting is one thing about this, but the other is the flow of the action in this. And we are launched now into a very dire situation for our Joes, right? We go back upstairs and we see Rock and Roll, and he's holding up his heavy machine gun, and he's like, "Dang it, I broke my favorite." Cover Girl's getting helped up by Duke. She's like, "What the hell was that?" Duke's like, "We'll find out later. But first we need to go on the defensive. My gut tells me we're about to get company. Rock and Roll, Clutch, Cover Girl, get the asset out of here. Stalker and Baroness, cover them." Right? Baroness. Again, the attitude, the pompousness. She's like, "And what will you be doing, American?" Duke looks up over his shoulder. He sees that Fang chopper is coming in for another pass. He's like, "Taking out their air cover." And with that, he dives out the window. We pan down, we look up, we're like, "Oh, look, there's Duke," right? There's Duke sailing through the air while bullets are whizzing probably just inches past his scalp. He's closing that target, coming ever closer. He grabs the skid. Now we're suddenly seeing the whole battle from a new perspective, and that's Cobra Commander and Destro watching from their base of operations. And it's Cobra Commander suddenly giving this respect. He's like, "This man is insane." Destro also has to take pause here. He's like, "Conrad Hauser, but I was told he died in an explosion." "It doesn't matter. We have the upper hand. Watch." Right? And what we see now is that's the absolute goddamn truth. Right? We pan back to the red lighting as we look upwards at all these Cobra infantry. They're firing their guns like crazy in these emergency red lit rooms, right? The red is the dominant lighting. Baroness is kind of fighting them back, and she's like, "Who are they?" Conrad Hauser, through his headset probably, is now throwing the pilot out of the Fang helicopter. He's like, "I don't know," right? Meanwhile, Rock and Roll, Cover Girl, and Clutch are trying to get the shard out of there. And Rock and Roll's, he's got a powerful pistol. That's it. He doesn't have his machine gun anymore. He's like, you two better hurry up, right? And Cover Girl's like, the shard is too big to carry. Clutch, we got to get it on the dolly. And meanwhile, Stalker's kind of like off to the side by the corridor, kind of laying down some suppressing fire with his assault rifle. And he's like, they're retreating. I think and all of a sudden, ding, 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 right? He looks down and there's a Cobra grenade there, right? And this is a moment because he doesn't have time to do anything but swear. And now we don't get to see it because we just see the side of the building just go out from this big shattering explosion. This is a Hollywood grenade, right? This thing causes a massive explosion, just like in Hollywood. And they've given you no indication that Stalker gets out of the way because the next thing you see is the dust settling. We just see Stalker, his eyes are closed. He's gotta be dead, right? You think he's probably dead, if not mortally wounded. He's out of the game for sure. And all of a sudden a boot stomps down right in front of his face, blocking our view. And we pan up, and now the lighting changes. It's no longer red. All the lighting has been blown out by this grenade. Now the lighting is it's going to be the firefight, right? And it's now blue. And at no point does the mood do anything but keep dropping it. You notice with the red, things were intense, right? But as soon as Stalker, it seems like Stalker's out of the game. You know, that whole red field went away and we're in this blue room. And the reason it's blue is because Cobra is sweeping the room, firing their weapons, and the weapons are Dark Energon. In the red room, we couldn't see it because the red lighting was so dominant, but here, and now we see the Vipers moving in, and they say, they're trying to move the Robotech Vipers. We can't let that happen, right? And that must be Mercer, of course, leading the charge. Now Rock and Roll is kind of like down behind cover, and he sees the lasers going over his head. He's like, what kind of guns are those? Baroness, she's ducking for cover, and it's smashing all the furniture around her. She's like, lasers. The others are like, if we break this, does this mean we have to buy it? And right away, you know, they're ducking for cover behind the dolly, trying to protect the shard. Cover Girl looks at Clutch. He's like, hardly the time for jokes, Clutch, right? But it's for moot point. You think they're ducking for cover, but the game is over. Already, the room's been swept through, and all of a sudden, the Vipers are on them. They're like guns pointed at them, looked at them, and of course, Mercer looks at them. He says, well, if you want to gift wrap that for us, that would be just fine, right? They've won. This is over. It's this moment where you know the Joes have lost the fight. Like, how do you can't fight back at this point when you've got no Stalker, no assault rifle. Everybody has been pinned down. The furniture shredded. Nobody's in the fight anymore. Your building's been taken, right? And it's that moment where they have to concede defeat. Except Rock and Roll doesn't. He picks up that broken assault or heavy weapon of his, and he hits Mercer in the back of the head with this thing in a way that would probably break a neck and kill a normal guy. He's like, back off, big man. What ends up happening next is Rock and Roll just kind of, he becomes the team goon. He throws the team on his back towards victory. He grabs every Viper he can. He's brawling them. He's like, Clutch, Cover Girl, get that damn thing out of here, right? Mercer gets back up and he just cracks, friggin' thunders Rock and Roll down with a single blow. And it's this moment where it's like, yeah, I'm going to beat you down, but there's almost a message, and he's like, you had to make this complicated, right? It's a quick glimpse into Mercer for a second. Just seconds ago, before Rock and Roll jumped to it, right? Mercer had the perfect setup to maybe let this one go by a little bit smoothly, as opposed to how it was supposed to go as per the mission parameters set out by Cobra Commander. Right? They had the shard. They had won. They didn't take a single casualty from what it looks like, and they had inflicted some serious damage. All they had to do was take the shard and leave. And everybody had their win. Nothing else had to happen. But Rock and Roll had to get up and fight back, even though it wasn't a winnable fight. And it reminded Mercer and everyone around him of what those mission parameters were, right? So he's like, yeah, bam, you had to make this complicated. Turns to the Vipers as the others are trying to take advantage of that moment Rock and Roll bought them. He says, if they get away, you will have to deal with that Psycho Commander, right? Then they grab Clutch, so he can't get away. He's like, back off. And, you know, Rock and Roll, he's trying to get up. He's spitting out blood and chiclets, right? He's like, oh no, you ain't getting that machine, right? He's going to stop him again. Rock and Roll ain't staying down. He's going to fight them. He's going to give them no damn choice. Mercer is not taking the shard, right? We see in the background, Duke's got control of the Fang. He sees something, Rock and Roll's in. There's something in his body language. He's like, Rock and Roll, what are you doing? Rock and Roll looks up. He's got this like shit-eating grin while he's spitting blood. And he's like, don't worry, Duke. I've been shot before. I can handle a light show. Right? And he charges forward. And that's where we have no choice but to accept that this is probably the end of not just Stalker, but Rock and Roll as well. Because the light show is visible through all parts of Rock and Roll as he charges forward. He'd been shot before, but not by Dark Energon. Not by the Shredders. And not by anything we were ready for. I was not ready as a reader to see that charge end that way, right? But we had no choice. That is the end of G.I. Joe #1. And guys, I don't get any closure on this till December 18th when G.I. Joe #2 from the Energon Universe saga comes out. And we'll probably get that confirmation that things are indeed as dark as they had seemed. But let me know in the comments. Are you guys reading the Dark Energon Universe? Are you reading G.I. Joe? Are you following what's going on? Did you pick up the first issue of this? And if so, how did you feel about what we saw? What do you think of that first team roster that Conrad and Hawk had picked out? What about CoverGirl's blonde hair? Or, of course, what happened to Stalker and Rock and Roll? Or how do you feel about seeing the Baroness as a G.I. Joe? Let me know in those comments, and feel free to also let me know, guys, if you want me to keep reading the G.I. Joe comics as I have done here, as I am trying to find out new things to bring you to this channel as I continue to try and grow it. So I would appreciate some feedback on that. And also, I would also like to know, do you feel like my voice is enough when you're reading female lines, or should I be using voiceover effects? I would also appreciate that. Either way, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for watching this one. And like I said, don't forget, when the Canada Post strike comes off, we will be giving away some of the G.I. Joe #1 issues that I was able to pick up for you guys as thank you gifts. All right, and make sure you're following and subscribing the channel, getting the notifications, so you can be a part of that when that time comes. We also have a Once a Man Cobra Commander going out on that one. All right, guys, this has been G.I. Joe #1 from Skybound Entertainment, as read by Crusty Old Crow. Thanks again, and we'll see you again next time.